What's going on, guys? This is James Allen. I am recording this on Friday, September 19th, 2025. In the last episode, I talked about using cloud functions as your backend. And I did want to make that video over again because I felt that the pace was rather rushed. And I wanted to do another video where I talk about it a little bit more calmer because I was really excited when I recorded that episode. You know, I had just deployed that particular function and was really happy that all the logic was working. So I want to do a video where I talk about the cloud functions as a backend one more time, but slower, calmer, and use another example that popped up this morning that I think was pretty interesting. So I've talked about rather than building your own web backend with different routes and paths that hits certain endpoints, you just use your cloud functions as the backend, for your mobile application. How you do that is when an event happen in your database, when a database event happen, that creates a trigger, which then fires your cloud function. And within this firing block, you could include all your backend logic that you would want, right? So you basically get the same thing as different routes from a web application, but just using serverless function. Really cool stuff. As a developer, I didn't take full advantage of what these cloud functions could do, and I cannot stress the fact that you should definitely exploit these little babies. Super useful. So this morning, not just this morning, over the last week, I found myself deleting a lot of the logic that I formerly had in my network calls and migrating them to the cloud functions, which is good, right? Because you want most of the heavy thinking to be done, not on a client side, but on a server side. So I've been doing that all this week. But this morning, something really interesting happened. That is, this morning I was working on a particular cloud function that reward my users with street cred when they check in, right? So when a user checks in the CityXcape application, they scan a QR code, it triggers an event in a database, and then, bam, 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 the logic goes in, and this is where I pay my users the street cred they're due. So if you're the person checking in, you get the street cred, you get a certain street cred. And if you're the person that owns the location where you're checking in, you get a certain amount of street cred as well. So there's two people, the owner of the location and the person checking in the location. Both of them get street cred. So I was writing that on the cloud function server side, right? And one of the logic I found myself writing was if you're the location owner, you can't check in your own spot, right? Because that's kind of like cheating. You own the location. It doesn't really make sense for you to get street cred for finding a spot that you own, right? So I wanted to make sure that this doesn't happen as part of the game logic. And I was writing a bunch of conditionals within that cloud function. And I wasn't satisfied. I kept going back and forth, back and forth. I wasn't satisfied with the logic that I was, pumping out. But then something hit me, right? Something hit me. I realized rather than create the logic to check if the person checking in owns the spot, why not just make that a security rule, right? Why not just make it a security rule where if you're the owner of that spot, you can't even trigger the cloud function in the first place. So that's what I did. I created that security rule. And, sure enough, what that security rule does is it checks if the person's authenticated clearly, but it also checks is if the person that's trying to check in, are they the owner of this spot? That's what the second line is. And if they are, they can't access this part of the database. The database basically reject the right, and the cloud function logic don't even trigger. So all these conditionals I was writing within the logic of the cloud functions removed by one security rule. And I wanted to basically stress another point. Lean on your security rules. That's something like I didn't used to do as a developer, right? Because I saw my security rules as simply a security feature, right? Like I want to make sure hackers can't get in the database, so or find open points in a database, right? But like what I realized is that you could actually use these security rules as part of your application logic itself. I never saw those security rules as a tool for that, but now I did thanks to this morning. So I want to tell you guys, other developers out there building cool application that have very interesting logic, lean on your security rules, man, because you could use them to remove a lot of application code. So that's my 2 cents for the day. In any case, that's all I have for this episode. If you want to do a consulting gig with me, feel free to ping me via email for whatever startup you have. I just did a gentleman last week who's building an interesting AI tool that they're going to use for surgery. So I thought that was pretty cool. Again, my rate is $300 an hour. It's not expensive when you think about the benefit you'll get, because I could save you a lot of time and headache, both on a technical and business front, if you have a startup going on. So feel free to ping me. Again, my email is in the description. The rate is $300 an hour, and I'm hoping to hear from you. In any case, my misfits, that's all I have for you in this episode. Don't forget to press that like button and support me on Patreon. I will see you next time.